The cityscape of New York City, specifically the glittering towers of Midtown Manhattan, was Elara Rossi's canvas. Her architectural firm, Aether Designs, occupied the top floor of a sleek, minimalist building, a temple to clean lines, glass, and structure. Elara loved the order of it all, the certainty that with enough precision, chaos could be kept at bay. She was engrossed in a delicate point of structural stress for a multi-million-dollar proposal when the quiet sanctity of her office was brutally breached. The door opened not with a polite knock, but with a silent, imposing force. 3 men entered. The one in the center, impeccably tailored in a charcoal suit, had the unnerving stillness of a patient predator. His face was unremarkable, yet his eyes held a cold, efficient intelligence. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards whose size and demeanor suggested they were built for damage, not diplomacy. "Miss Rossi," the central man began, his voice a low, polished monotone that somehow cut through the hum of the city. "My employer, Mr. Volkov, wishes to discuss a serious breach of contract concerning your brother, Leo." Elara's carefully constructed composure began to crack. Leo, her younger brother, a gifted artist with a terrible weakness for high-stakes poker. Leo is an independent adult. His debts are not the concern of Aether Designs. She tried to project authority, a trick she used often in male-dominated boardrooms, but these men were impervious to civility. The man smiled, and the effect was chilling, a flash of white against the gray, devoid of warmth. "Ah, but the rules are different when the debt is to the Vultures." He produced a thin, black file from his inner jacket pocket and slid it across Elara's pristine white desk. The file wasn't just a threat, it was a dossier. It contained irrefutable proof of Leo's colossal gambling debts and, worse, a contract Leo had signed under duress, effectively assigning the next 3 years of Aether Designs' profits and assets to the organization. The bottom line was a staggering $8 million, and the interest was compounding hourly. "This is coercion. This is illegal," Elara hissed, snatching the contract. "We operate beyond the scope of legality, Miss Rossi, and we value our contracts. Your brother has signed away his financial future, and yours by extension." However, the man continued, his eyes glittering, "Mr. Volkov is open to negotiation, a different kind of payment." He named the organization's leader, Dante Volkov, and the location for their meeting, an abandoned shipping facility on the desolate, windswept edge of Brooklyn, accessible only after midnight. "You must be punctual." The Shadow, as Mr. Volkov is known to those who respect his power, abhors tardiness. Elara's entire world narrowed down to a point of paralyzing dread. The Vultures, a name she had only heard whispered in financial circles, a modern criminal syndicate that operated like a shadow corporation. This was not a problem she could solve with a blueprint or a lawsuit. This was a direct plunge into the abyss. As the suited men departed, leaving behind the heavy scent of danger and expensive cologne, Elara stood alone, the shimmering lights of Manhattan mocking her sense of control. She knew she had only one card left to play, herself. To save her brother and her life's work, she had to trade her light for the darkness, walking directly onto the enemy's turf. She spent the next few hours meticulously preparing, not a legal defense, but her mental armor, knowing that her mind was the only weapon she possessed against a man named the Shadow. The air in the Brooklyn docklands was harsh and metallic, thick with the smell of brine and industrial waste. Elara felt ludicrously exposed, her expensive trench coat and tailored slacks a beacon in the grime. She was led through the sprawling, cold emptiness of the warehouse by a silent guard into a single, dimly lit inner chamber. The chamber was sparse, rough concrete walls, the pervasive chill of the night, and a large, empty metal table dominating the center. And then, there was Dante Volkov. He was positioned at the far end of the table, half swallowed by the gloom, an intimidating study in lethal grace. He wasn't overtly menacing, yet his presence was a physical weight in the room. He was tall, powerfully built, and dressed in a perfectly fitted, dark 3-piece suit that seemed to absorb the light. His features were striking sharp jawline, high cheekbones, but it was his eyes that seized her attention. Dark, intense, and utterly without emotion, like polished obsidian. He was everything his moniker suggested, a consuming, elegant darkness. "Miss Rossi," Dante's voice was a low, resonant wave, carrying a subtle edge of command. "Thank you for joining us." "Where is my brother, Mr. Volkov?" Elara asked immediately, refusing to be drawn into any pleasantries. She forced her voice to remain steady, despite the frantic drumming of her heart. Dante ignored the question. He gestured to the folder on the table. "8 million, Miss Rossi." A considerable sum for a childish indiscretion. We are a business, not a charity. The initial contract Leo signed transfers the intellectual property of Aether Designs to my holding company effective immediately. He pushed a second document across the cold metal surface, clean, precise, and utterly terrifying. However, I present you with an alternative payment structure. Elara stared at the new contract. It wasn't about money. You will design and supervise the construction of a new, highly secure headquarters for the Vultures. A skyscraper, a fortress disguised as luxury real estate in Queens. It must be a marvel of engineering and an impenetrable citadel. In exchange, I clear Leo's debt, his contract is voided, and Aether Designs retains its integrity. Elara's professional mind grappled with the enormity of the task, while her moral compass spun wildly. You want me to use my skills to build a monument to organized crime? I want you to build me a shield against my enemies, Dante corrected, his eyes narrowing slightly. A structure that ensures the longevity of my organization. Refusal is not an option. If you walk away tonight, Aether Designs is liquidated by tomorrow morning, and Leo, well, your brother will be put to work in a way that is less financially profitable and far more unpleasant. He picked up a heavy silver letter opener and idly spun it between his fingers, the movement slow and hypnotic. Choose, Miss Rossi, your freedom or your family and career. Elara looked into the heartless, beautiful face of the shadow. She saw no mercy, only calculation. She had already lost her freedom the moment Leo signed that initial contract. I accept, she stated, the word tasting like ash. She reached for the gold-plated pen Dante offered. What are the stipulations of my labor? The catch? Dante leaned forward, his presence suddenly overwhelming, his scent of sandalwood and leather filling the space. You will be under my direct, constant supervision. You will live in a designated residence mine. You will not communicate with anyone about this project or your current circumstances, save for what is absolutely necessary for the work. You are, for the duration of this contract, my exclusive asset, and most importantly, absolute loyalty. Any hint of betrayal, any attempt to leak information, and the consequences for Leo will be swift and final. Do we understand each other, Elara? He used her first name not as a courtesy but as an assertion of ownership. We do, Mr. Volkov, she confirmed, signing the contract with a firm, practiced hand. She wouldn't let him see her fear. Dante watched her sign, a faint, almost satisfied curve to his lips. He finally addressed her earlier concern. Your brother is safe, for now, as a guarantee of your future cooperation. Now, let's talk about the foundation of a new empire. The contract was sealed, not with blood, but with the cold, hard steel of necessity, binding the architect of light to the master of darkness. The transition from independent, respected architect to a gilded prisoner in Dante Volkov's penthouse was immediate and jarring. Elara was moved to a separate wing of the luxurious apartment in Midtown, a space that felt both expansive and claustrophobic. The view of the city was breathtaking, but the electronic lock on her door was a constant, humiliating reminder of her status. Dante met her in the main living area, a space of stark, uncompromising modernity, where black marble met floor-to-ceiling glass. He was wearing an expensive, dark cashmere sweater, which somehow made him look less like a crime boss and more like a young, impossibly rich and deadly CEO. Welcome to your new office, Elara, he said, indicating a state-of-the-art holographic design table displaying the nascent outline of the spire. We begin now. I don't pay for contemplation. Elara pushed aside the humiliation and focused on the work, the only thing that gave her power here. She approached the holographic blueprint, her professional instinct taking over. This initial structural design is aesthetically pleasing, Mr. Volkov, but tactically flawed, she began immediately, pointing to the visual data. The sheer volume of glass on the southern facade makes it vulnerable to everything from drone surveillance to RPGs. A headquarters for an organization of your stature cannot rely on standard blast-proof technology. It needs to be impervious. The true strength must be hidden, internal. Dante listened intently, his expression unreadable. He walked around the table, his movements fluid and economical, settling beside her. His proximity was a subtle, non-physical pressure. So, what is your fix, architect? We use a double-skin facade with a self-healing polymer layer, disguised by a decorative metal mesh that also acts as an electromagnetic shield, Elara proposed, tapping the projected image. The core structure must be a hybrid of reinforced concrete and tensile steel, designed to absorb and distribute shock from a single point of impact. Most importantly, the upper levels need a decoy pattern. We make the command center look like an ordinary executive floor. while the true nerve center, the security and data hubs, is buried 3 levels below ground, connected only by a private, biometric elevator shaft. Dante's eyes narrowed, but there was a spark of something almost like grudging respect. You think like a fortress architect, not a city planner. Excellent. I am thinking like the client requires, Elara retorted, avoiding his gaze, determined not to give him any emotional leverage. I need confirmation on the materials budget. I will not compromise on security, and that means expense. The budget is unlimited, Elara. Only the timeline is concrete. Dante stepped back, creating a necessary distance. You have proved your capability. Now, prove your commitment. He picked up a small, leather-bound volume from a side table, a book of classic Russian poetry. Until the design is finalized, your brother remains in my secure holding, comfortable, but certainly not free. Every day of delay is a day he remains under my control. Focus on the structure, Elara, not on the contract. As he turned to leave, Elara stopped him. Mr. Volkov, I need to know, what is the greatest threat this structure must withstand? Who are your enemies? Dante paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed against the vast cityscape. My greatest enemy, Elara, is my past, and they are called the Izba Collective. They are patient, sophisticated, and they destroyed everything I once loved. Build me a shield strong enough to withstand their vengeance. If you do that, you get your freedom. If you fail, the price is no longer just Leo's debt. The sheer weight of his confession, a raw, unexpected glimpse into the motivation of the shadow, left Elara breathless. She wasn't just building a secure building. She was building a final defense in a generational war of blood and vengeance. She was now part of Dante Volkov's story, a prisoner of his past. The dynamic between Elara and Dante quickly settled into a tense, unpredictable rhythm. Their days were spent in close proximity, dissecting schematics and debating engineering principles. It was a bizarre professional intimacy, where intellectual respect warred constantly with the terror of her captivity. Dante was a relentless overseer, possessing an unnerving knowledge of counterintelligence and physical security that went far beyond mere theory. He would often appear in her wing unannounced, demanding answers to hypothetical attack scenarios. One late evening, Elara was finalizing the blueprints for the subterranean parking garage and its integrated escape tunnels. Dante entered, his movement silent. The lights of the city outside painted streaks across his dark suit. He didn't speak immediately, merely watched her work with an intense, analytical gaze that felt like a physical touch. The ventilation system for the lower levels, Dante finally stated, tapping the screen with a long finger. You've routed the main intake shaft near a high-traffic urban tunnel. A simple gas attack would cripple the entire first sublevel within minutes. Explain. Elara didn't hesitate. She had anticipated this challenge. It's a calculated risk designed as a defensive measure, Mr. Volkov. That intake shaft is the only vulnerable point. It's a pressurized decoy. If a gas attack occurs, the system automatically seals the lower levels, but simultaneously, the pressure release diverts the toxic gas into the urban tunnel itself, which, due to its depth, would require specialized equipment to seal. It turns their attack into a public safety nightmare, forcing authorities to prioritize the tunnel, giving your team critical time to neutralize the threat at the source. A slow, cold smile stretched across Dante's lips. You designed a collateral damage protocol, a beautifully ruthless tactic, Elara. You're learning the rules of my world quickly. I am learning to protect my assets, she corrected sharply, pushing back from the desk. My mind, my work, and my brother. I have to think like my enemy, which means I have to think like you. The conversation often veered into these dangerous intellectual clashes. Dante was testing her boundaries, probing her morality. Tell me, Elara, he asked, leaning against the edge of her desk, the space between them dangerously small. If you found a critical, fatal flaw in the spire's design, something only you could recognize, would you tell me? Or would you save it, keeping it as your own key to freedom? The question was a psychological knife twist. Elara held his gaze, her heart hammering. If the building is compromised, my contract is worthless, and my brother is endangered. My self-interest lies in the perfection of the structure. I will tell you every flaw, Mr. Volkov, because I want this building to be my ticket out, not my grave. Dante held her gaze for a long moment, searching. He wasn't looking for lies. He was looking for conviction. He finally nodded, a gesture of rare, if chilling, approval. Good. Because in this world, betrayal is the only unforgivable sin. He then pulled out his phone, making a quick, nonverbal command. Seconds later, a grainy video feed appeared on her large monitor. It was Leo. He was exercising in a small, clean room, looking significantly better than he had in the initial photos. He wasn't thriving, but he was alive and well-fed. Proof of life. Delivered upon request, Dante stated, the screen going blank. But remember, this is a privilege, not a right. Your dedication determines his safety. The controlled glimpse of her brother was a powerful emotional weapon. Elara felt the fragile ice around her heart begin to crack. She had seen the chilling depths of Dante's control, but she had also seen the slightest ripple of trust in his eyes. She was navigating the complex, treacherous architecture of his mind, and with every intense, demanding session, the lines between fear, resentment, and a dangerous professional fascination began to blur. She knew one thing. She had to remain cold, perfect, and indispensable. The tension in the penthouse was a physical entity, a tight coil that bound Elara and Dante. She was now deep in the meticulous planning stages, forced to interact not just with Dante, but with his inner circle. Silas, the head of security, a man whose face looked like a map of old battles, was her most frequent and most hostile collaborator. During a secure meeting discussing the placement of the internal surveillance nerve center, Silas openly challenged her. "Miss Rossi," Silas grunted, his skepticism etched across his scarred features, "your decision to use the sub-level maintenance access as the primary security server hub is ludicrously complex. It's hard to monitor, and even harder to access quickly in a crisis." "That is precisely the design's strength, Silas," Elara countered, her voice sharp with professional authority. She zoomed in on the 3D model, highlighting the proposed location. "Everyone expects the security hub to be in the center, heavily guarded. Mine is disguised as a dusty, rarely used utility room, accessible only by a single, encrypted service lift whose terminal is hidden behind a rotating bank of water filters. It's a dead end. In an active breach, no attacker will waste time on a utility room. Furthermore, the complexity you complain about is a defensive barrier. The security interface is designed to require a sequential input from two separate, non-adjacent consoles. Two men, in two separate locations, must authenticate simultaneously. That level of cooperation is difficult for an outside threat to replicate instantly." Silas stared at the model, clearly frustrated by her logic but unable to fault the tactical brilliance. "You rely too much on trickery, architect." "I rely on human psychology and misdirection," Elara stated, meeting his challenging gaze. "My job is to give Mr. Volkov an advantage. Yours is to implement it." Dante, who had been silently observing the exchange from the side of the room, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Silas, dismissing the man. Silas left, radiating resentment. "You handle yourself well, Elara," Dante remarked, stepping into the space Silas had occupied, his presence immediately tightening the air. "Silas despises working with outsiders. You earned his ire, which means you earned my respect." "I prefer earning my freedom, Mr. Volkov," she replied coolly. Dante ignored the barb. He placed a single, faded photograph on the design table, deliberately obscuring a crucial foundation plan. It was the photo he'd shown her before his family, standing in front of the old brownstone. "I need to tell you about the fire," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense register. "It wasn't a random event. It was a message. My father had refused a merger deal with a rival syndicate, the Izba Collective, run by a monster named Alexei Krylov. Krylov didn't just want power. He wanted to extinguish every threat to his line. That fire was meant to erase the entire Volkov legacy." His eyes were locked on the photo, momentarily lost in the past. "I was 10. I ran out for a forgotten toy. When I came back, the street was chaos. I watched the house burn. Krylov taught me that the only thing that matters is strength, and the only way to protect what you love is to build walls so high, nothing can reach them." He looked up, his gaze now fixed fiercely on Elara. "Krylov is currently funding the expansion of the Emerald Hand, the organization that recently targeted our shipping routes. He is still out there, still hunting. The Spire isn't just a headquarters, Elara. It is the final, impenetrable shield against the man who burned my life to the ground. You must understand the stakes. You are building against a relentless, personalized vengeance." The raw, unexpected glimpse into his core trauma was a deliberate, powerful move. He was cementing her loyalty not with a threat, but with shared context. Elara felt a disturbing shift in her perspective. She was no longer just the hostage architect. She was a participant in a decades-long, bloody saga. The deceit she was weaving into the building's design was now woven into the fabric of Dante's soul. The shared secret of Dante's past created a volatile, subterranean connection between them. Elara found herself analyzing his behavior, his guarded emotions, as intensely as she analyzed the building's structural loads. She saw the ruthlessness, but she also saw the immense cold cage of grief he lived within. Their work sessions often devolved into strange, tense quasi-dates, late-night discussions over blueprints, punctuated by the silent, omnipresent city. One night, Dante brought 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of expensive dark whiskey into her studio. The storm outside had intensified, creating a dramatic backdrop. "A toast," he said, pouring the amber liquid and pushing a glass towards her. "To resilience, and to the most brilliant architect I've ever had the misfortune to employ." "I'll toast to the swift completion of my contract," Elara replied, taking a small, defiant sip. "And to the moment I see my brother walk free." Dante leaned against the desk, watching her, his posture relaxed but his eyes intensely focused. "Tell me something real, Elara, not about engineering. If you weren't here, what simple, mundane thing would you be doing right now?" The sudden shift to the personal caught her off guard. She let her guard down just a fraction. "I'd be at my apartment, probably eating takeout, watching a terrible romantic comedy, and not worrying about whether the air duct system is an optimal choke point for sarin gas." A genuine weary laugh escaped her. "I'd be normal." "Normalcy is a myth," Dante mused, swirling the whiskey. "It's the goal of the weak. The powerful forge their own reality." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her face. "You have the capacity for power, Elara. You just choose to use it to serve others." "I choose to use it to save my family," she corrected, gripping the glass tighter. "There's a difference." "Is there?" he challenged, taking a step closer. "You are building the single most secure private fortress in the country. You are deciding who lives and who dies inside its walls. You have more power than most CEOs in this city." Elara felt the dangerous pull of his logic, the way he twisted morality to fit his world. She steered back to her anchor. "I need proof of life, Dante. A live feed, weekly." "The photos aren't enough anymore." Dante sighed, a low, impatient sound. He respected her demand, but hated being controlled. He called one of his lieutenants, speaking in a rapid, clipped Russian dialect. Moments later, a clean, high-resolution feed appeared on her monitor. Leo was asleep on a simple bed, a book open on his chest. The room was modest but secure. Elara stared, a wave of profound relief washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered, the gratitude escaping before she could stop it. "Gratitude is unnecessary," Dante said, ending the feed, "but honesty is appreciated." He walked toward the panoramic window, looking out at the glittering, cold empire he commanded. "I showed you my past, Elara. Now you know my foundation. What about yours? What makes the great architect tick, beyond a brother's reckless mistakes?" Elara hesitated, then realized that transparency, ironically, might be her best defense. "My father was a small-time contractor. He taught me that a structure's integrity is everything. He lost everything when a larger, corrupt firm undercut him and used cheap, dangerous materials on a city project. He was crushed. I built Aether Designs not just for money, but to prove that integrity and brilliance can win. I hate corruption. I hate the shadows." And yet, Dante finished, turning back to face her, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Here you are, building the ultimate shadow." The air crackled between them. Elara felt the danger and the strange, electric thrill of being truly seen by this man. The ice around Dante was thick, but she had touched the raw, burning core beneath. And in that moment, she knew the professional contract was irrevocably becoming personal. The subtle shift in their dynamic began to manifest in small, unnerving ways. Dante's supervision grew less about architecture and more about her. He started attending her meals, not speaking, just observing her reactions. One afternoon, Elara was sketching in the living room, feeling the oppression of her confinement. Dante entered, holding a single, antique silver locket on a delicate chain. It was feminine and utterly out of place in his stark, masculine environment. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "A family heirloom?" Elara ventured, recognizing the craftsmanship of a past era. "My mother's," he confirmed, the word seeming to catch on his throat. "She wore it the night the house burned. It was recovered from the debris, miraculously intact." He opened the locket, revealing a tiny, faded picture of a young couple, his parents. She wasn't a part of the life. She was an artist, a musician. She was collateral damage. He wasn't seeking sympathy. He was sharing the profound injustice that fueled his empire. "I swore that no woman who came under my protection would ever be collateral damage again. They will either be safe or they will be untouchable. He laid the locket on the table, not offering it, just displaying the burden he carried. Elara felt a confusing wave of pity and alarm. He was demonstrating that even his capacity for connection was rooted in violence and control. "And which category do I fall into, Mr. Volkov?" Elara challenged, refusing to lower her gaze. "Safe or untouchable?" A flicker of genuine amusement crossed his face. "Neither, Elara. You are a necessity, and necessities are guarded with extreme prejudice." The following day, Dante forced her to accompany him on a trip out of the penthouse, ostensibly to view the construction site of the Spire in Queens, but secretly, to test her. They traveled in a heavily armored SUV, surrounded by security. As they drove through the gritty, bustling streets, Dante pointed to a small, brightly lit patisserie. "Stop," he commanded his driver. He turned to Elara. "I haven't had a real cannoli since I was a boy. If you can acquire one from that particular shop without being followed or attracting undue attention from my own surveillance teams, you can have 5 uninterrupted hours of work on the plans tonight. A small test of your discretion." It was a ridiculous, low-stakes assignment that held high-stakes consequences. Elara, seeing the subtle glint of a challenge in his eyes, accepted. She used her knowledge of the city's blind spots and her practiced professional invisibility. She ducked into a narrow alley, changed direction quickly to lose the subtle tailing SUV, and used the cover of a crowded street market. She emerged minutes later with the cannoli, composed and outwardly calm. When she returned, Dante was waiting. He took the cannoli, but his eyes were on her. "You took the long way around, used the shadows, and neutralized 2 of my best trackers using a fruit stand as cover," he observed, taking a bite of the pastry. "You didn't panic. You adapted." "I am an architect, Mr. Volkov," Elara stated. "I understand flow and blockage. I simply designed my own escape route." He finished the cannoli, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. "Indeed, you're adapting to the rhythm of the life. The light you carry, Elara, is becoming comfortable in the dark." The statement was both a compliment and a terrifying prophecy. She had entered the lion's den, and now she was learning to hunt. A week later, Elara received an unusual directive. She was to prepare for an evening function. Not a formal work meeting, but a high-profile dinner. "Tonight, you are not my architect. You are my companion," Dante informed her, standing in the doorway of her room, his presence overwhelming. He was already in a tuxedo, the black fabric emphasizing his formidable frame. "We are attending a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. This is a crucial networking event to solidify the legitimate facade of my holding company. You will be seen as my partner, a respected, successful architect. Do not disappoint." Elara stared at him, stunned. "A gala? You want me to play society wife?" "I want you to be the brilliant cover story," Dante corrected, his voice dangerously even. "You bring credibility. Your designs are known. Your presence authenticates my narrative. You will be polite, you will be charming, and you will not utter a single word about the Spire or our true arrangement." A personal stylist arrived moments later, transforming Elara from a weary architect into a stunning vision of composure and elegance in a bespoke evening gown. When she finally stepped out, Dante's steel gaze swept over her, lingering for an unnerving moment. "You clean up well, Elara," he conceded, offering his arm, a gesture that felt less like chivalry and more like claiming a trophy. The gala was a sea of New York's elite, power brokers, politicians, and the inevitable intertwined dark money. Elara, leaning subtly on Dante's arm, felt the intensity of their connection. His hand on her back was possessive, a constant, gentle pressure that directed her every move. During the polite, empty conversation with a senator and a hedge fund manager, Dante smoothly introduced Elara, letting her discuss her legitimate work with Aether Designs. Her intelligence and success acted as a powerful, mesmerizing distraction. Then, the evening took a sharp, dangerous turn. They were approached by a charismatic, middle-aged man with sharp, predatory eyes and an expensive, aggressive smile. "Dante Volkov," the man purred, extending a hand that Dante took with a cold, brief grip. "Such a pleasure. And who is this stunning addition to your collection?" "This is Elara Rossi, my associate, the creative genius behind my new ventures." Dante introduced her, his voice retaining its smooth composure, but Elara felt a subtle, almost imperceptible hardening of the muscles in his arm. The man was Viktor Chernov, a known intermediary for the Izba Collective, and a lieutenant of Alexei Krylov. Elara felt a surge of pure dread, recognizing the direct threat. "The architect," Chernov mused, his eyes trailing over her with an insulting familiarity. I hear she's building you quite the headquarters. A fortress, I'm told. A bit paranoid, aren't we, Dante? Still worried about old ghosts? The tension between the two men was a palpable, dangerous silence. Elara knew she had to intervene. A fortress? Elara laughed lightly, a perfect society sound. Hardly, Mr. Chernov. It's a multi-use luxury residential tower designed for optimal light and airflow. Mr. Volkov simply values high-end, discreet security for his clientele, as any successful businessman in Manhattan should. We are designing a sanctuary, not a bunker. Her smooth, confident denial was perfectly delivered. Chernov paused, clearly annoyed that his jab had been deflected by a civilian. Dante's eyes briefly met Elara's, a look of searing approval flashing in the dark depths. He placed his hand lightly on her lower back, a signal of possessiveness that went beyond the social and was purely primal. As Elara says, Dante finished, his voice dangerously soft. A sanctuary. We are beyond old ghosts, Chernov. We are building the future, something your organization seems incapable of achieving. Chernov's smile vanished, replaced by a momentary, naked hatred. As he walked away, Elara's legs almost buckled. She had just verbally parried a high-level criminal on behalf of the most dangerous man in the city. Dante leaned down, his mouth close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Well played, architect," he whispered. "You are more valuable than I realized. You lied with exquisite precision." The evening solidified their partnership in a terrifying new way. She was no longer just his prisoner. She was his co-conspirator, his brilliant mask, and the only woman who had seen the raw, vengeful core of the shadow. The proximity and the shared danger created a charged, undeniable intimacy. Following the gala, the psychological distance between Elara and Dante began to erode, replaced by a bewildering complexity. Dante's demeanor shifted from calculated coldness to an intense, almost demanding scrutiny of her well-being. He was still the jailer, but a jailer who demanded her perfection. One particularly grueling night, Elara was working on the complex ballistics testing data for the external facade. She was exhausted, having slept only a few hours. Her concentration faltered, and she accidentally spilled a cup of scalding coffee over the sensitive digital rendering table. A sharp, pained cry escaped her as the hot liquid hit her hand. Dante, who was on the other side of the penthouse on a secure call, ended the conversation instantly and appeared in her studio in seconds, moving with alarming speed. "What happened?" His voice was clipped, urgent. He didn't wait for an answer. He took her hand, his large, rough fingers surprisingly gentle as he examined the angry red burn forming on her skin. "It's just coffee," Elara muttered, embarrassed by her clumsiness and his unexpected concern. "No, it's a structural failure," he stated coldly, but his actions belied his words. He led her directly to the immaculate kitchen, running her hand under cold water. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone familiar with injury, retrieving a professional burn kit from a hidden compartment. As he carefully applied the specialized ointment and wrapped her hand with a gauze bandage, the silence was heavy with unspoken things. His touch, though clinical, was undeniably tender, creating a jarring contradiction with the ruthless crime lord she knew him to be. "You're tired," he observed, his eyes dark with a complex emotion she couldn't name. Was it concern or anger at the potential loss of productivity? You cannot afford to make mistakes. A single structural weakness, whether in the building or in yourself, invites attack. "I am not a machine, Dante," she argued, the first time she had used his first name outside of a heated architectural debate. The name felt surprisingly natural on her tongue. "I'm under extreme stress, confined and worried sick about my brother. I'm going to make mistakes." Dante finished the wrapping, securing it with tape. He didn't pull away immediately. His thumb brushed lightly over her wrist. "Leo is safe," he repeated, his voice dropping to a low assurance. "You have my word. I do not harm assets who perform. Rest, Elara. We will resume tomorrow." Perfection is not achieved through exhaustion. He left her studio, but the lingering sensation of his touch and the jarring display of care remained. Elara looked at the perfectly bandaged hand. He was a monster, a ruthless man who commanded fear and death, yet he possessed an unnervingly human capacity for meticulous care. The cold, impenetrable shell of the shadow had cracked, not with a sudden explosion, but with a slow, deliberate erosion of control. Later that night, unable to sleep, Elara wandered into the penthouse library. She found Dante sitting in a leather chair, not reading a financial report, but holding his mother's locket. He looked up, meeting her gaze across the quiet room. "You should be resting." "I can't," she admitted, walking closer. "I keep thinking about the fire. About Krylov. What does he want that the spire will protect you from? Dante's eyes were shadowed, filled with an ancient pain. He doesn't just want my territory, Elara. He wants my submission. He wants to prove that his savagery trumps my precision. He believes he can burn down everything I build, just like he did 20 years ago. He closed the locket. He hunts my weaknesses. And right now, the greatest weakness I possess is you, the architect, who holds the complete blueprint to my fortress. If he gets to you, the foundation crumbles, literally and figuratively. He was confessing her strategic importance and her danger with brutal honesty. He wasn't just guarding her, he was protecting his vital secret. Then let me contact my brother, Elara pleaded. Let me know he is truly safe. Give me a reason to build this thing with total commitment, not just fear. Dante studied her face for a long moment, considering the request. He understood the psychological necessity of hope. Fine. Tomorrow, a secure 3-minute voice call with Leo. But understand, that hope is now tied directly to the structural integrity of the spire. Don't let either one fail. She had won a small victory, wresting a fraction of control back from the shadow. But the intense, unsettling intimacy of the past few hours, the shared vulnerability, the strange, possessive care, had opened a fissure in the emotional wall she had meticulously constructed. She was beginning to see the man who survived the fire, and that was far more dangerous than the monster who ran the organization. The promised call with Leo was brief, tense, but undeniably real. Leo's voice, though guarded, confirmed his safety, injecting a vital burst of motivation into Elara. She poured her relieved energy back into the blueprints, her focus sharper than ever. The work now required them to spend entire nights in the studio, solving complex structural problems, a dangerous proximity that frayed the remaining professional boundaries. The arguments were less about security and more about aesthetics, revealing their deeply contrasting personalities. The main lobby needs height, Dante, Elara insisted, pulling up a rendering of a towering, minimalist atrium, a sense of scale and transparent power. It speaks to legitimacy. Legitimacy is irrelevant, Dante countered, dismissing the design with a wave of his hand. It needs a controlled sightline, a sense of compression. You want a welcoming space. I want a space that reminds you who is in control the moment you step inside. Their argument escalated, their voices tight with both exhaustion and unacknowledged tension. You are so obsessed with control, Dante, that you don't even know how to simply exist. Elara flared, slamming her hand down on the table, the one he had bandaged. You treat the world like a vault. Do you ever just look at something and appreciate the beauty of its existence without calculating its vulnerability? Dante stared at her, the sudden ferocity in her voice momentarily stunning him. He walked slowly around the table until he was standing directly behind her, his height and warmth overwhelming. I exist only to control the chaos, Elara, he whispered, his voice dark and dangerous, close to her ear. The moment I allow myself to appreciate the beauty of existence, I open a door, and someone, like Krylov, will walk through it and burn everything down. His hands settled on her shoulders, a possessive, heavy weight. He began to massage the tense muscles, the action surprisingly skillful and instantly relaxing. And as for appreciating beauty, I do, every day. I look at the work of your hands, the lines of your designs, the fire in your eyes when you defend your choices. I appreciate that beauty, Elara, because I own it. The line blurred. The gentle, sensual pressure of his hands on her body was an act of dominance, a reminder of the contract, yet it sent an undeniable shiver of sensation through her. Elara tensed, trying to pull away, but his grip was firm. Don't confuse ownership with affection, Dante. Affection is frivolous. Ownership is absolute, he murmured, his breath rustling her hair. He pulled her slightly back against his chest, holding her captive against his powerful frame. But tell me, when I touch you, architect, is your heart calculating its escape route, or is it calculating the risk of remaining? The question was a direct psychological strike. Elara's mind raced, but her body betrayed her. She leaned back, just an inch, drawn to the powerful, dangerous heat of him. It's calculating the risk of your next move, she managed to reply, her voice a little breathless. Dante turned her slowly, forcing her to face him. His eyes, usually cold steel, were now dark with a palpable, restrained desire. He lowered his head, his gaze sweeping over her lips. Then let's remove the calculation, he stated, and the remaining distance between them vanished. His kiss was not tender or romantic. It was an act of raw claiming, demanding and overwhelming. It was the heat of the fire that burned away the last vestiges of the contract's formality. Elara resisted for a millisecond, then yielded, the sheer danger of the moment breaking through her defenses. She gripped the lapels of his shirt, drawing him closer, driven by a primal need to break through his shell and a terrifying attraction to the power he wielded. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily, the silence in the studio charged and profound. That, Dante whispered, his voice rough, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, was not on the blueprint. No, Elara replied, her voice trembling slightly. But it changes the structural integrity of the entire project. They had crossed a line, a critical structural fault in the foundation of their cold agreement. The contract remained, but now, it was overlaid with a dangerous, forbidden heat. Elara knew she had just invited the ultimate vulnerability, and Dante Volkov had accepted the risk. The kiss was an earthquake, fundamentally shifting the ground beneath them. The next day, both Elara and Dante returned to their work with a fierce, almost punishing intensity, building their emotional distance back up with a veneer of cold professionalism. But the air between them was permanently altered, thick with unacknowledged desire and fear. Elara knew she had to understand him more fully to protect herself and Leo. She used her growing intimacy to ask probing questions. One afternoon, while reviewing the advanced security protocols, Elara noticed a small, pale scar just beneath the cuff of Dante's expensive watch. "What is that?" she asked, pointing to the mark. Dante immediately covered it, his jaw tightening. "A relic." "Focus on the data, Elara." But Elara pressed the issue. "You showed me your mother's locket. You told me about the fire. If we are truly partners in this defense, I need to understand what else you're protecting." He stared at her, then slowly exhaled, a long, weary sound. He pulled back his cuff, revealing a cluster of thin, white scars that ran along his wrist, almost like deliberate cuts. "When I was 12, he began, his voice flat. "After the fire, before I had the power to protect myself, my father's rivals tried to use me as bait. They wanted to force my uncle, who was trying to salvage what was left of the organization, into a bad deal. They held me in a cellar for 3 months. They weren't interested in killing me, only breaking me." He tapped the scars. "These are souvenirs from the patience of men who know how to exert pressure." Elara's heart ached with a sudden, devastating empathy. She saw the boy who survived the cellar, not just the man who ran an empire. "How did you escape?" "I didn't. I was released when my uncle capitulated," Dante admitted, his eyes blazing with shame and fury. "I learned 2 things in that cellar, Elara. 1, never put yourself in a position to be leveraged. And 2, never let a piece of paper determine your life's work. I was too weak then. I am not now." Elara reached out, her fingers hovering over the pale scars, a gesture of profound, silent understanding. She knew then that his need for control, his fortress mentality, was not just about power. It was about survival. "The contract I signed," she whispered. "It's the very thing you vowed to never allow again, yet you forced me into it." Dante looked at her, his cold facade momentarily shattered. "It is a contradiction I live with, a necessary evil. I needed your skills, Elara, and you had a weakness I could exploit. It is the rule of this world. But I swear this. When that building is finished, I will honor the contract. You will walk away free, and Leo will be untouchable." He reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her skin. "I won't let you be collateral damage, Elara. I won't let you be burned." The confession of his childhood trauma and his perverse sense of honor created an undeniable bond. Elara realized she had fallen, not for the idea of a romanticized villain, but for the broken, damaged survivor who hid behind the mask of the shadow. The threat of Krylov, the relentless pursuit of vengeance, now felt personal to her too. The shared vulnerabilities and the undeniable heat between them led to a new, dangerous stage, a genuine, if fraught, alliance. Elara was no longer merely building the fortress, she was advising the strategist. The construction of the spire was now in full swing. To maintain the project's tight schedule and security, Elara frequently had to leave the penthouse and visit the construction site in disguise, accompanied by Silas and Dante's elite security team. During one site visit, deep in the newly poured concrete sublevels, Elara noticed a subtle anomaly. A section of the specialized reinforced concrete designed to absorb vibration and resist drilling showed hairline cracks and a slight discoloration that should not have been possible. She immediately brought Dante down to the site, dismissing the construction foreman. "Look at this, Dante." Elara pointed to the flaw, her architect's eye focused on the microscopic imperfection. "This is not a structural stress fracture. This is the result of chemical tampering. Someone sabotaged this batch of concrete. They introduced an agent that will slowly, over time, compromise the integrity of the entire foundation. Dante's face went rigid, his eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. Impossible. Every material is vetted. Every supplier is under surveillance. Not impossible. Subtle, Elara argued, taking a sample of the concrete. Whoever did this is highly sophisticated. They didn't hit the structural integrity hard. They planted a ticking time bomb. This is an internal job, Dante. Someone on your vetted list is working for Krylov. The realization was a cold slap of reality. Their fortress, the symbol of his final victory over the past, was compromised from within. Dante ordered a full, immediate lockdown and a deep-dive security audit. He didn't trust Silas or any of his other subordinates to handle the internal threat. He trusted only Elara and himself. The blueprints, Dante commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with lethal purpose. The complete plans for the spire are the only way to track the extent of the sabotage. But they are stored in the highest security vault, in my legitimate corporate headquarters. We have to go there, now, alone. Elara understood the gravity. The corporate vault was impregnable from the outside, but it was not designed to withstand an attack from the man who built it. More importantly, going there meant leaving the relative safety of the penthouse and plunging into the truly exposed public sphere. If the mole is deep, they'll know you're accessing the core data, Elara warned, pulling on a construction helmet. This is a trap, Dante. They're waiting for you to react. Then we give them a reaction they won't forget, Dante stated, his eyes metallic and cold. If Krylov thinks he can burn me again, he is mistaken. You and I, Elara, we are going to expose the traitor. You built the walls, now help me purge the infection. The stakes had never been higher. They were not just partners in architecture, but co-conspirators in a desperate, deadly search for a traitor deep within the Vultures' ranks, a search that required them to risk everything. The unlikely alliance was sealed, cemented not with love, but with the cold, hard necessity of shared survival. The trip to Dante's legitimate corporate tower was a blur of high-speed, silent efficiency. They bypassed the standard security entirely, using a rarely utilized sub-level freight entrance known only to Dante and 2 trusted technicians, who were now locked in a safe room. The corporate headquarters was a pristine environment of glass and chrome, a perfect cover for the dark activities of the Vultures. Dante's main vault was located in the heavily shielded CEO's office. Using a complex series of biometric and retinal scans, Dante accessed the vault. Inside, the massive digital plans for the spire were loaded onto a highly encrypted tablet. The traitor is a high-level operative, Dante explained, rapidly inputting complex analytical software. They would need access to the construction logs, the materials procurement schedule, and the security shift rotations. The list is short but deadly. Elara took the analysis further, her architectural mind racing. The sabotage was chemical. That points to someone in procurement or quality assurance. But the location, the foundation, is critical. That suggests someone who knew exactly where the first stress points would be. That narrows the field further. As they worked, the analytical program highlighted the most likely suspect. Silas. Silas, Elara whispered, the realization hitting her hard. The head of security, the man who had despised her, had constantly criticized her security designs not to improve them, but to know their weaknesses. He knew the access points, the decoy mechanisms, and the weaknesses in the materials supply chain, Dante muttered, his face a mask of devastating fury. He knew my past. Krylov must have paid him a fortune. Suddenly, the silent alarm on the vault door flashed red. They were trapped. The magnetic lock is engaging. 15 seconds, Dante snarled, grabbing Elara's arm. Silas knew we would come here. He wasn't waiting at the construction site. He was waiting at the source of the data. The ventilation shaft, Elara shouted, pointing to a small, often overlooked maintenance panel high on the wall. I designed the structural vents to be wide enough to pass emergency fiber optic cables. If we can get through the panel and into the ceiling duct, we might bypass the main elevator shafts. Dante didn't hesitate. He pulled out a specialized kinetic tool, blasting the panel open with a muffled, focused charge. He hoisted Elara into the cramped, dark space first, then followed, sealing the panel behind him just as the final magnetic lock thudded into place. They crawled through the stifling black service duct, Elara leading the way, guided only by her intimate knowledge of the building's hidden structure. They were now deep inside the walls, operating completely outside the security net. You built this building, Dante breathed, his voice tight with a mixture of terror and dark admiration. "You are our only way out." "You own the building, Dante," Elara replied, her heart pounding. "I just know where the fire escapes are." They emerged onto a deserted, lower-level floor, just as the sound of heavily armed boots echoed from the main entrance. Silas was bringing his men. The predator had been identified, and now the hunt was on. Elara and Dante were alone, exposed, relying solely on the architect's knowledge and the crime boss's ruthlessness to survive the very building he owned. Elara and Dante were now on the run inside Dante's own corporate tower, navigating the network of service corridors and stairwells she knew intimately. The irony was devastating. "We need to get to the rooftop. Access the secure extraction route," Dante instructed, pulling Elara down a barely used fire escape. "I need time to contact my loyalists, the ones outside Silas's network." As they reached a crucial junction in the stairwell, the only one that led to the upper floors, they were ambushed. Two of Silas's men, armed and prepared, blocked their path. "Hold it, boss," one of the men barked, leveling his weapon. "Silas says you've lost your mind. He's taking over." Dante shoved Elara behind him, positioning his massive frame as a shield. "You fools have been bought by Krylov's silver," he snarled, his voice a low, lethal sound. "You'll be dead by morning. Stand down." The men hesitated for a fatal second. That was all Dante needed. With a terrifying surge of controlled violence, he disarmed the first man with a brutal, sharp twist of the wrist, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the stairwell. He used the man's body as a barrier, simultaneously firing two precise, non-fatal shots at the second man's shoulder and leg. The confrontation was quick, brutal, and terrifyingly efficient. Elara watched, frozen. The raw violence of the scene a stark reminder of who Dante truly was, a professional killer, a man forged in the dark. "Move," Dante commanded, grabbing her hand and pulling her past the fallen men. His hand, moments ago so gentle when bandaging her burn, was now covered in the residual heat of combat. As they burst onto the roof, the wind whipping Elara's hair, the helicopter Dante had called a black, sleek custom model was descending. But a second sound cut through the noise. The sharp, metallic click of a weapon being readied behind them. "Going somewhere, boss?" They spun around. Silas stood there, his face contorted in a sneer of triumph and hatred. He held a high-powered pistol steady in his hand, aimed directly at Dante's chest. "You were always too sentimental about your little architect, Volkov," Silas spat. "She was the perfect lure." "Krylov sends his thanks. Now, you die where you started on the ground." "Krylov won't protect you from the Vultures, Silas," Dante warned, his body tense, ready to move. "He doesn't need to. I'll be in Moscow by the time your loyalists figure out you're dead," Silas gloated. He slowly moved his aim, pointing the gun at Elara. But first, the architect. Just to make the wound stick, Dante reacted instantly, shouting, "No!" He threw his entire body across the small distance, slamming into Elara and driving her to the hard concrete just as Silas fired. The gunshot ripped through the night air. Elara felt the impact of Dante's body, and then a searing, blinding pain in her shoulder. The shot had grazed her, tearing through her jacket and skin, but the momentum of Dante's tackle had knocked Silas slightly off balance. Dante, shielding her completely, rolled quickly, and returned fire with a small backup weapon he carried. 3 precise, muffled shots rang out. Silas staggered, dropping his weapon, clutching his torso, his look of triumph dissolving into shocked disbelief. "Traitors," Dante snarled, standing over the fallen Silas, his chest heaving, "are never forgiven." He didn't check on Silas. He immediately turned his full attention to Elara, who was clutching her bleeding shoulder. "The wound," he commanded, his voice raw with urgency and fear, a genuine, unmasked terror Elara had never heard. He tore a strip from his own shirt and pressed it hard onto the wound. "It's a graze. You'll live. Come on." He hoisted her into his arms, carrying her the final few yards to the waiting helicopter. As they ascended rapidly into the night, leaving the chaos behind, Elara leaned her head against his chest, hearing the rapid, frantic beat of his heart. She had just been grazed by a bullet meant for her, deflected by the man who had imprisoned her. She was bleeding, terrified, and profoundly, dangerously close to the monster who had just saved her life. Their alliance was now cemented in shared trauma and blood. The helicopter ride was a haze of pain and adrenaline. Dante gave emergency instructions to his pilot to fly to a secure, private medical facility he owned outside the city limits, a place where a bullet wound wouldn't attract police attention. During the flight, he tore off his tuxedo jacket, using it to apply pressure to Elara's shoulder, His face was pale, his control visibly shaken. "You shouldn't have moved," he rasped, his eyes fixed on her. "You should have stayed behind me." "He was aiming for me, Dante," Elara said weakly, leaning into his warmth. "He wanted to hurt you by hurting your asset. I just proved him right." Dante didn't deny it. He simply held her tighter. "Never again. I will not lose you to his vendetta." Once safely at the private clinic, Elara's wound was quickly cleaned, stitched, and bandaged by a discreet doctor. When she was released, Dante didn't take her back to the Manhattan penthouse, but to a hidden, heavily fortified villa nestled deep in the wooded, private estates of Long Island. "No more corporate fronts, no more public risks," Dante declared, leading her into the sparse, secure sanctuary. "We finish this from here. We have the data on Silas's movements. Now we use it to eliminate Krylov. Silas was the architect of the sabotage, but Krylov is the mastermind," Elara said, her mind, despite the pain, sharp with focus. "Krylov wanted a slow, humiliating collapse of your fortress. If the building had failed, your legitimate front would crumble, and your enemies would sense weakness." Dante nodded, pulling up the digital blueprints of the spire on a massive shielded screen. "We have the flaw in the foundation. We have the traitor's log. We know the how. Now we focus on the where and the when of Krylov's final move." Elara stared at the blueprint, an idea sparking in her mind. "The building is compromised. We can't use it. But we can use the idea of it. The structural flaw, the one Silas introduced, is only dangerous if the building is fully loaded and operational. But if Krylov thinks his plan is still in play, we can turn the fortress into a lure." She leaned closer to the screen, her voice gaining strength. "The groundbreaking ceremony. It's the most high-profile, legitimate event scheduled. Krylov will want to witness his victory. We announce the ceremony is moving forward, despite the minor setback caused by a disgruntled former employee." Dante grasped her concept immediately, his eyes lighting up with a dangerous brilliance. "We fix the visible damage, but leave the core flaw intact. We leak the information that the foundation is sound, but that the primary server hub, your decoy one, is the target of the real attack. We give him a target he thinks he can hit." "No," Elara countered, looking Dante directly in the eye. "We give him an audience. We announce a media event. He won't hit the building when it's empty. He wants to hit your power base. He wants to hit you, surrounded by your new legitimate allies. We make the groundbreaking the stage for his final act." Dante looked at the architect, the woman he had imprisoned, who was now covered in his blood and designing the ultimate, lethal ruse. "You are designing a perfect trap, Elara," he said, a look of profound, terrifying respect on his face. "A human target, surrounded by media and false security. It's beautiful and utterly ruthless." "It's architecture, Dante," she stated, ignoring the throbbing pain in her shoulder. "The design is meant to control the flow of all variables. You are the bait, the ceremony is the stage, and Krylov is the variable we finally eliminate." The trap was set. The architect and the crime boss were in complete, deadly sync. They would use the compromised foundation of the spire to destroy the man who had compromised Dante's past. The days leading up to the fake, groundbreaking ceremony were a whirlwind of meticulous planning. Elara and Dante worked non-stop from the secluded villa, their professional focus masking a deep, growing emotional entanglement. The quiet privacy of the villa, a stark contrast to the chaos of their lives, forced an intimacy that could no longer be denied. One evening, after finalizing the details of the security perimeter for the trap, Elara stood on the villa's terrace, watching the pouring rain wash over the dense forest. Dante walked out to join her, standing close, his presence a heavy, comforting shield against the night. "The plan is solid, Elara," Dante said, his voice quiet against the drumming rain. "Krylov's people have confirmed they have the compromised intelligence on the ceremony. He will be there, and you will be there." "Exposed," Elara countered, the fear a dull, constant ache. "It is the only part of the plan I cannot control." Dante turned to her, his hands gently framing her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. The rain slicked his dark hair and ran down his intense, severe features. "I won't be exposed. I'll be prepared," he corrected. "But let's be honest about the uncontrollable variables, Elara. They are not about Krylov." He lowered his voice, his thumb tracing the contour of her cheekbone. "I broke my rule when I brought you here. I broke my rule when I kissed you, and I shattered it completely when I took a bullet for you. I swore I would never allow a weakness to dictate my strategy, and you are my greatest, most profound strategic weakness." Elara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his confession, the honesty of the monster. I'm not a weakness, Dante. I'm a vulnerability. There's a difference. And I have one for you, too. I started this to save my brother. Now I'm doing it to keep you alive. You, the man who held my life hostage. She opened her eyes, meeting his fierce gaze in the rain. I love the fire and the order you represent, the way you command chaos. I know the man who survived the fire, and I hate that I need to protect him. This is not logical. This is not the blueprint of a healthy relationship. But it is true. Dante's grip tightened, his eyes darkening with a mixture of pain and fierce relief. He pulled her against his chest, holding her tightly, allowing the rain to soak them both. I don't know the word, Elara, he admitted, his voice ragged. I was never taught the geometry of love. I only know protection. I only know that the thought of losing you, of Krylov touching you, makes the cold precision of my world collapse. I will burn the entire city down to keep you safe. He pulled back slightly, looking intensely into her eyes. If we survive this, Elara, the contract is null and void. Leo is free, but you will not be free of me. I won't allow it. You are the center of the new design, the foundation I will build everything on. Do you understand? Elara nodded, tears mingling with the rain on her face. I understand. Let's finish the trap, Dante, and then let's see if the architect in the shadow can build something real. Their kiss this time was a profound, drenched promise, a confession of love, forged in fear, adrenaline, and shared trauma. They were two broken halves, finding a terrifying, perfect fit. The day before the ceremony, Elara and Dante were reviewing the final security feeds. Elara, still nursing her shoulder, sat beside him, going over the list of known Krylov operatives who would likely be in attendance. There's something wrong with Krylov's operational plan, Elara observed, pointing to the projected movements of the suspected assassins. They are too focused on the decoy server hub, exactly where we want them. But Krylov is too smart. He wouldn't risk an all-out assault on a building that isn't fully operational. He wants maximum humiliation, not a skirmish. Dante frowned, leaning in. He wants me dead, Elara. The humiliation of the building failure is secondary. No, Elara insisted, tapping a photo of Viktor Chernov, the man from the gala. Chernov is Krylov's right hand. If Krylov is the mastermind, why isn't Chernov coordinating the visible attack? He's listed as a prominent guest at the ceremony, not a field commander. Suddenly, a realization struck her, cold and clear. It's not about the building failure or the assassination. It's about the narrative. Krylov wants to destroy your legitimacy, Dante. He wants the world to watch your empire implode. Dante's eyes widened, the steel sharpness returning with lethal clarity. The media, the live broadcast of the ceremony. Exactly, Elara confirmed. The assassination is the distraction. The true weapon is right here. She pointed to the spot on the blueprint where the chemically compromised foundation would be. If Krylov has an agent in the crowd who can trigger the chemical reaction, a low-frequency acoustic pulse, a minor focused charge at a key, legitimate moment, the media will capture the visible, catastrophic failure of the foundation live. The disgruntled employee story will be discredited. Krylov will not have just killed the boss. He will have killed the entire legitimate face of the Vultures. Live on primetime news. Dante stood up, his fury a palpable force. He wants to destroy the lie I built. He wants to prove my empire is rotten at the core. And Chernov is the trigger, Elara concluded. He will be in the crowd, close to the platform, ready to activate the detonation. The plan had shifted from an ambush to a high-stakes counter-assassination in front of the world's media. Krylov himself wouldn't be present. He would be watching his masterpiece unfold. We stick to the plan, Dante announced, his decision final and brutal. The ceremony goes ahead. The security perimeter remains focused on the decoy server hub. But my personal security, the ones I trust, will focus entirely on Chernov. You, Elara, will be the signal. How? Dante looked at her, his eyes intense. You will be on stage with me. The moment you see Chernov make his move, a signal, a device, a drop of the hand, you give the signal. A visible action. Only you know where the bomb is, and only you know the trigger. Elara swallowed hard. She would be the canary in the coal mine, the one standing next to the bait, surrounded by the enemy. And if I'm wrong? You won't be, Dante stated, pulling her into a fierce, desperate embrace. You built this. You know the structural integrity of every lie. Trust your architect's eye, Elara. It is the only thing standing between my future and my past. The groundbreaking ceremony for the spire was a spectacle of false opulence and manufactured legitimacy. Media helicopters hovered, politicians smiled, and the crowd of high-profile guests milled around the meticulously decorated site in Queens. Elara, wearing a custom-designed dress that covered her healing wound, stood on the stage next to Dante, who looked every inch the powerful, successful CEO. Her role was simple: stand still, look confident, and watch for Viktor Chernov. The air was thick with tension. Every movement in the crowd felt like a threat. Dante began his address, his voice calm and authoritative, speaking about investment, community, and the future of New York City. Elara searched the front rows, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There he was, Viktor Chernov, standing directly in front of the stage platform, beaming a disarming, polite smile, mingling with the local assemblyman. As Dante reached the climax of his speech, preparing for the symbolic push of the golden shovel, Chernov made his move. He subtly reached into his inner coat pocket, not for a gun, but for a small metallic object, a remote detonator. He glanced quickly at his watch, ready for the precise moment of maximum impact. Elara knew this was it. She didn't scream, didn't point. She did the only thing an architect in a tuxedo could do. She acted on the blueprint of their plan. She grabbed the ceremonial golden shovel that stood on a pedestal next to Dante, and with a powerful, desperate surge of adrenaline, swung it hard, not at Chernov, but at the pedestal supporting the microphone. The metal pedestal crashed to the ground with a deafening clang, the microphone screeching in feedback, instantly silencing the ceremony and seizing the attention of every camera. That was Dante's signal. He didn't miss a beat. As the crowd erupted in confused murmurs and the media rushed the stage to cover the technical difficulty, Dante's highly trained, discreet security team positioned in the crowd, not on the stage, converged on Chernov with lightning speed. Chernov, caught completely off guard by the unexpected chaos, was disarmed and neutralized before he could press the button. Dante's men quickly spirited him away from the site, blending into the surrounding security detail. On stage, Dante looked down at Elara, whose chest was heaving with effort and relief. He smiled a genuine, dark, relieved smile that reached his eyes. He calmly took the microphone from a technician, his voice once again booming over the speakers. "My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. A slight technical difficulty. The passion of our architect often gets the better of her structural analysis." He looked at Elara, a profound message passing between them. He lowered his voice, just enough for the cameras to catch it, a charming gesture that played perfectly to the narrative. "I suppose I must accept the consequences of employing such genius. Now, shall we continue?" The ceremony concluded, the golden shovel plunged into the dirt, and the media, distracted by the incident, failed to notice the swift disappearance of a prominent guest. The final battle had been won, not with bullets on the stage, but with the precise, calculated intelligence of an architect who knew exactly where to create a structural failure to divert a greater catastrophe. They had exposed the truth behind Krylov's attack and neutralized his agent, all under the cover of a routine media event. Back at the remote Long Island villa, the adrenaline wore off, replaced by the profound relief of survival. Chernov was gone, the threat neutralized, and the information gleaned from his captured device led to the methodical dismantling of Krylov's remaining operations in the U.S. Dante and Elara were finally alone, the contract effectively fulfilled, the enemies defeated. Elara sat on the plush sofa, watching Dante pour 2 glasses of champagne. He looked tired but victorious, the weight of the past 20 years finally lifting from his shoulders. He walked over to her, handing her a glass, his eyes holding hers with an intense, proprietary tenderness. "It's over, Elara," he said simply. "Krylov will fall. Silas is gone. The spire is safe. The contract is complete." He then pulled out a folded, signed document, the original contract she had signed in the dark Brooklyn warehouse. He held it over the fireplace. "This is the source of all the pain, the leverage, the rules. It no longer applies." He dropped the contract into the fireplace, and the paper instantly burst into flames, turning to ash. "You are free," he confirmed, watching the last vestiges of the old world burn. "Leo is safe, already being transitioned back into the city, with a clean start and a generous trust fund, my apology for his suffering." Elara felt the weight of the past year lift from her shoulders, replaced by a devastating emptiness. She was free, but the man she had fallen in love with was standing right in front of her, still the dangerous, untouchable shadow. "And what about us, Dante?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Is this also a piece of paper you intend to burn?" Dante knelt before her, setting his champagne aside. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't an engagement ring. It was a simple, elegant key. "This is the key to this villa, Elara," he explained, his gaze unwavering. "And the key to my legitimate life. I am still Dante Volkov. I still run an organization that lives in the shadows, but I no longer run it alone. I need the structure. I need the clarity. I need the brilliance and the fire that you bring to my chaos." He took her hands, his touch warm and firm. "You once asked me if love was a weakness. I spent my life believing it was. I was wrong. Watching you on that stage, throwing the shovel, knowing you saved me, I realized love is the ultimate strength. It is the only thing that makes the fortress worth defending. I am offering you a new contract, Elara. One without paper, without fear, but with absolute commitment. To build a life with me. To be my partner in everything, the light and the shadow. To teach me how to exist, and let me teach you how to command." Elara looked into his eyes, seeing the ruthless power and the profound vulnerability. It was a life of danger, of secrets, of never being entirely free of the past. But it was a life with him, the man who understood the architecture of her soul. "A new contract," Elara confirmed, letting a small, genuine smile bloom. "But on my terms, Dante, transparency, and an end to the brutal necessities. The Vultures need a new foundation." Dante smiled, a rare, breathtaking sight. "The foundation is you, Elara, and it is stronger than any steel." 1 year later, the towering structure of the spire pierced the Manhattan skyline, a seamless blend of luxury and impenetrable security, a testament to Elara Rossi's genius. It was fully operational, its foundation safe, its secrets locked away. Elara and Dante were standing on the completed, private rooftop terrace of the villa, now their permanent residence. The city of New York was bathed in the soft, hopeful glow of the rising Sunday. Elara was leaning against Dante, comfortable in the heavy, possessive warmth of his arm around her. She was now the legitimate public face of his largest corporate venture, a powerful, respected figure in the city's development scene, her architecture firm now untouchable. "It's perfect," Elara murmured, looking at the city she now shared with the man beside her. "It's a structure," Dante corrected softly, turning her to face him. "The only perfection is here." He touched the side of her face. Their life was still not normal. It was a careful balance of legitimate power and necessary shadow. Dante still commanded his organization, but he did so with a new clarity, guided by Elara's ethical rigor and strategic brilliance. He was still the shadow, but she was the light that illuminated his path, preventing him from losing himself to the darkness. Their love was a unique, strong alloy forged under the pressure of fire and violence. They were the architect and the executioner, the planner and the protector, building a future not on borrowed time, but on absolute, undeniable commitment. "Happy anniversary, architect," Dante whispered, leaning in to kiss her. "Happy anniversary, Shadow," she replied, kissing him back fiercely. "Ready to design the next chapter?" "Always," Dante confirmed, pulling her close, gazing out at the vast, complex city below. The spire stood as a monument to their dangerous beginning, but their life together, built on honesty and mutual protection, was the true masterpiece, a defiant, complete, and perfectly happy ending forged in the heart of the modern Mafia.